What happens when a 10-year-old girl interrupts a high-profile trial, holding the one piece of evidence that could change everything? Can a child's voice be louder than the justice system? Emily Hartman is about to prove that sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected places. When the courtroom is a moments away from convicting an innocent man, one small voice rises above the rest. Will they listen before it's too late? The courtroom was silent, heavy, unforgiving. Judge Dean adjusted his glasses, his sharp gaze scanning the room. The trial of Michael Gaines, a respected businessman accused of embezzlement, had reached its final moments. The air was thick with tension, the kind that only came before a verdict. On one side, the prosecutor, Ms. Bradshaw, stood poised, her confidence radiating. She was certain she had won. On the other, Michael Gaines sat stiffly at the defense table, hands clasped together, waiting, hoping. The jury sat motionless, absorbing the final arguments. The case against Gaines had been airtight, too airtight. It felt rehearsed, perfect, maybe a little too perfect. Judge Dean cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, then it happened. A small voice rang out, clear, determined, unshaken. That's not true. You're all wrong. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Heads turned. There, in the middle of the aisle, stood a 10-year-old girl clutching a stuffed rabbit. Judge Dean's gavel slammed down. Order in the court! The bailiff moved toward her, but she stood her ground. No fear, no hesitation. I know the truth, the girl declared. Her voice carried through the room, cutting through the weight of the moment. And you need to listen to me. Michael Gaines turned, his face frozen in shock. Ms. Bradshaw's lips pressed into a thin line. Your Honor, this is a disruption. Who are you? Judge Dean interrupted, his deep voice laced with curiosity. The girl straightened her back, unshaken, resolute. My name is Emily Hartman. I'm in 5th grade, and I have proof that Michael Gaines is innocent. The room erupted. Whispers, murmurs, questions. Judge Dean raised a hand, silencing the noise. He studied the girl. Sharp eyes, fierce determination. A child who was sure of something the rest of them had missed. You have proof? The judge asked, his tone unreadable. Emily nodded. Yes, sir. Ms. Bradshaw scoffed. This is absurd. She's just a child. Emily turned to her, steady, unafraid. That doesn't mean I'm wrong. The bailiff hesitated. He was used to removing disruptive people from the courtroom, but this wasn't just any outburst. This was something different. Judge Dean tapped his gavel lightly. Step forward, Miss Hartman. Emily took a deep breath and marched toward the front. Michael Gaines watched her, disbelief in his eyes. The entire courtroom seemed frozen, as if the very air had shifted. Now, Judge Dean said, folding his hands, you said you have proof. Tell me, Emily, why are you here? Emily clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter. Her heart pounded, but she refused to back down, because the truth mattered, and someone had to tell it. Emily stood at the front of the courtroom, her small hands gripping the stuffed rabbit tight. All eyes were on her. Judge Dean leaned forward. You said you have proof. Start from the beginning. Emily took a deep breath. This was it. My name is Emily Hartman. I'm 10 years old. I live in Fairfield with my mom. Her voice was steady, but inside her heart pounded. Michael Gaines watched her, his confusion evident. He didn't know this girl. So why was she here? Emily swallowed hard. I came because I know the truth. Michael Gaines didn't do it. He didn't steal anything. A murmur swept through the room. A child saying this? What could she possibly know? Ms. Bradshaw folded her arms. This is nonsense, Your Honor. She's a child, probably coached. Emily turned to her, eyes sharp. No one told me to come here. I figured it out myself. Judge Dean studied her carefully. How? Emily took another deep breath. It started a few weeks ago. Emily sat on the floor, coloring while her mom, Jessica Hartman, folded laundry. The TV played softly in the background. Businessman Michael Gaines has been accused of embezzling millions from his company, the news anchor said. Emily barely listened until she saw his picture. She gasped. Mom, it's him! Jessica glanced at the screen. What are you talking about? Emily pointed. That's Mr. Gaines, the man who fixed our roof. Jessica frowned. Sweetheart, what? Emily's mind raced. 2 years ago, a big storm had damaged their roof. Jessica couldn't afford repairs. Then one day, Michael Gaines showed up. Emily remembered it clearly. No cameras, no news, just a man with a toolbox, fixing what needed fixing. When Jessica asked why, he had simply said, because I can help. That man, a good man, was now being called a criminal? Something was wrong. Emily turned to her mom. I don't believe it. Jessica sighed. Sweetie, we don't know him. Maybe... No! Emily's voice was firm. She knew what she knew. He's innocent. I can prove it. Jessica shook her head. Emily, this isn't a school project. Grown-ups handle these things. Emily's jaw clenched. But what if the grown-ups were wrong? That night she stayed up late, searching everything she could about Michael Gaines. The trial, the accusations, the evidence. Something didn't add up. She kept looking, digging, connecting dots others hadn't. Then one night at her mom's diner, she overheard a conversation. Two men in suits talking in hushed voices. Gaines will take the fall, just like we planned. Emily's eyes widened. They were framing him. She carefully peeked around the counter. One of the men was Victor Reynolds, a powerful businessman with a reputation for dirty deals. Her heart pounded. She had found something real. That night she printed everything. The suspicious conversation, the faulty evidence, the proof of Gaines's alibi. She showed it to her mom. Jessica sighed, tired, dismissive. Emily, even if you're right, no one's going to listen to a kid. Emily's stomach twisted. Then she'd have to make them listen. Emily took a deep breath. I have proof. Real proof. Judge Dean's expression was unreadable. Where is it? Emily pulled a folded paper from her pocket and held it up. The entire courtroom leaned in. This was just the beginning. The night Emily made her decision, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. They were lying, framing an innocent man, and no one else seemed to see it. Her mom's words echoed in her head. No one's going to listen to a kid. Then she'd have to make them listen. Emily sat up, grabbed her notebook, and wrote 3 words at the top of the page. Find the truth. Emily spent every free moment in the library poring over newspapers, online articles, and legal documents she barely understood. The case against Michael Gaines was too perfect. Everything lined up too well. He signed fraudulent documents at 7:30 p.m. on March 5th, the report said. Emily frowned. That date sounded familiar. She flipped through old newspapers, eyes scanning headlines. Then she found it. A charity gala. Same night, same time. And there, in the event photos, was Michael Gaines, smiling, laughing, shaking hands. Emily's heart pounded. She checked the timestamp, 7:32 p.m. There was no way he could have been in 2 places at once. The prosecution's timeline was a lie. She quickly printed the photo. Proof. But would a single picture be enough? She needed more. It was late, and Emily sat in the back of the diner while her mom worked. She was supposed to be doing homework, but she couldn't focus. Then she heard them, 2 men in suits sitting at the counter. Low voices, serious tones. She froze. She knew that voice. Victor Reynolds, the man from the news. Her pulse quickened. She had to listen. She slowly pulled out her phone, pressed record, and pretended to be scribbling in her notebook. Gaines will take the fall, one of them muttered, just like we planned. Emily's stomach dropped. Planned? You're sure the jury won't question it? The other asked. Reynolds scoffed. Please, the evidence is locked in. By the time anyone figures it out, it'll be too late. Emily's hands shook. They set him up. She had it. The proof no one else had. She waited until they left before stopping the recording. She played it back. Crystal clear. Undeniable. This would change everything. She rushed home, bursting through the door. Mom, I have proof. Jessica sighed. Emily, what now? Emily shoved the papers and her phone toward her. Look, the picture, the recording. They're framing him. Jessica frowned, skimming the paper. Then she listened to the recording. Her face softened, but then she sighed. Emily, she rubbed her temples. Even if this is real, no one's going to take it seriously. You're a kid, and these are powerful men. Emily clenched her fists. So we just do nothing? Jessica's eyes filled with exhaustion. Sweetheart, the world doesn't work like... Emily turned and stormed to her room. If her mom wouldn't help, she'd do it herself. She stared at her notebook. The trial was starting soon. She had to act fast. What if I just... Tell the judge myself? Her stomach twisted. Was she really going to do this? She glanced at the stuffed rabbit on her bed. Her dad gave it to her before he left. She gripped it tight. Yes, I'm doing this. She stuffed her evidence into her backpack and set her alarm. Tomorrow she'd sneak into that courtroom, and she wouldn't leave until someone listened. Emily's alarm buzzed before the sun even rose. She sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Today was the day. Her heart pounded as she grabbed her backpack. Evidence. Check. Notebook. Check. Courage. She swallowed hard. She'd figure that part out later. Her mom was still asleep, exhausted from the late diner shift. Emily hesitated. At her bedroom door. She wanted to tell her, but she already knew what Jessica would say. Emily, stay out of this. So she didn't say anything. She just left. Emily stood outside the massive courthouse doors, staring up. It was intimidating, larger than life. She adjusted the straps on her backpack. No turning back now. She watched as people filed in. Lawyers, reporters, police officers, important people. I don't belong here. The thought crept in, but she shoved it aside. She had to belong. She gripped her stuffed rabbit for comfort and walked forward. A guard stood at the entrance, checking bags. Emily's pulse spiked. She couldn't just waltz in. She was a kid. Her eyes darted around. Then she saw them. A group of students on a field trip. Perfect. She hurried over, slipping into their crowd, keeping her head down. Single file, the teacher called. Emily fell in line. The guard barely glanced at her as they walked through. She was in. The courthouse was huge. Hallways stretched endlessly. She wandered, heart racing. Courtroom 4A. That was the one. She peeked inside. The trial hadn't started yet, but the room was already filling up. Michael Gaines sat at the defense table. He looked tired, defeated. Ms. Bradshaw, the prosecutor, stood confidently organizing her papers. She looked like she had already won. Emily's stomach churned. She needed to act fast. She slipped into a seat in the back, small and unnoticed. No one questioned her. She clutched her backpack. The photo proving Gaines's alibi, the recorded conversation, everything was in there. She just needed the right moment. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as people settled in. Then, the judge entered. All rise. Emily's breath hitched. This was it. Judge Dean took his seat. His presence was commanding, powerful. The prosecution may proceed with closing arguments, he said. Emily's hands clenched into fists. She listened as Ms. Bradshaw spoke, her voice smooth and calculated. The evidence is undeniable. Michael Gaines signed fraudulent documents. The paper trail is clear. The jury must see the truth. Emily's chest burned. The jury was hearing lies. She looked at Gaines. He stared straight ahead, like a man who had already lost. She couldn't let this happen. Her heartbeat thundered. It was now or never. Emily took a deep breath, stood up, and shouted, "That's not true! You're all wrong!" The courtroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, stunned silence. All eyes turned to her. Judge Dean's gavel slammed down. "Order! Who said that?" Emily stood tall. She clutched her rabbit, her voice steady. "I know the truth," she declared, "and you need to listen to me." The courtroom froze. For a moment there was only silence, thick, suffocating, charged with disbelief. Then, chaos, gasps, murmurs. Shocked whispers rippled through the crowd like a sudden gust of wind. At the judge's bench, Judge Dean's sharp gaze locked onto the small figure standing in the aisle. A 10-year-old girl. Emily's hands trembled, but she clenched them into fists, forcing herself to stay strong. She had come too far to back down now. The bailiff rushed forward. "Young lady, you can't just—" Judge Dean raised a hand. "Let her speak." The room stilled again. Ms. Bradshaw, the prosecutor, scoffed, annoyed, dismissive. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. This child is disrupting a legal proceeding." Emily turned to her, eyes blazing. "I'm not disrupting. I'm telling the truth." A collective hush fell over the crowd. Judge Dean leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Miss Hartman, if you truly have something important to say, now is your chance. But choose your words carefully." Emily took a deep breath and stepped closer. She reached into her backpack, pulled out a folded sheet of paper, and held it up. This is a photo of Michael Gaines at a charity event, she said, her voice steady. The same night he was supposed to be signing those fake documents. The room erupted again. Ms. Bradshaw's face darkened. That's absurd. That doesn't prove... Emily didn't let her finish. There's a timestamp, she continued louder this time. It proves he couldn't have been in two places at once. Judge Dean extended his hand. Let me see that. Emily walked forward and placed the photo on his bench. The judge examined it carefully. The photo was clear. Michael Gaines in a tuxedo, standing at a podium, shaking hands with another businessman. A date and time stamp in the corner. Undeniable proof. The courtroom was a sea of shocked expressions. Michael Gaines himself looked frozen, as if he wasn't sure whether to hope or fear false hope. Then, a sudden outburst. She's lying! A man jumped to his feet in the audience. Emily's stomach dropped. She knew that voice. It was him, one of the men from the diner. The one who had whispered, "Gaines will take the fall." The bailiff rushed toward him. "Sir, sit down." The man's face was pale, sweating. He pointed a trembling finger at Emily. She doesn't know anything." Judge Dean's gaze sharpened. "Oh?" he said, his voice dangerously calm. "And how exactly do you know that, sir?" The man's mouth opened, then closed, trapped. Emily felt her pulse pounding. He was scared, because he knew she was telling the truth. Judge Dean's expression darkened. He turned to the prosecutor. "Ms. Bradshaw, did your office verify this timeline before bringing charges?" Ms. Bradshaw hesitated. For the first time, she didn't look so confident. "The evidence was..." She stopped, choosing her words carefully. "We were given official records." Judge Dean held up a hand. "That's not what I asked." His eyes flicked to the bailiff. "Take that man into custody for questioning." The man visibly panicked. "You can't... I didn't..." But the bailiff was already grabbing his arm, escorting him toward the back of the room. The whispers grew louder. Emily watched it all unfold, barely believing it herself. The first crack in the case. The first sign of the truth breaking through. Judge Dean turned back to her. "Miss Hartman," he said, his tone measured, "I don't know how you came across this information, but you may have just changed the course of this trial." Emily stood a little taller, because she knew. This was only the beginning. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Emily had done it. She cracked the case open. Judge Dean's sharp eyes flicked between the photo in his hand and the panicked man being restrained by the bailiff. "This changes everything," the judge muttered under his breath. The air in the room felt electric. The defense attorney, who had been silent for most of the trial, suddenly found his voice. "Your Honor," he said, standing quickly, "given this new evidence, I request an immediate investigation into the timeline of events." Ms. Bradshaw, the prosecutor, visibly stiffened. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular," she argued. "We can't allow this trial to be derailed by a child." Judge Dean's gavel slammed down. "Enough," he said, his voice cold. "This child just introduced evidence your office failed to catch. I'd say that warrants further investigation." Ms. Bradshaw swallowed hard but said nothing. Emily's heart pounded. This was working. The judge turned to the bailiff. "Get this photo to the police. I want verification on the timestamp immediately." The bailiff nodded and hurried out of the room. Judge Dean exhaled, turning back to the defense table. "Until then, this trial is officially on hold." Gas rippled through the room. Michael Gaines stared at Emily, his expression unreadable. For the first time in weeks, there was hope in his eyes. During recess, police officers flooded the courthouse, digging deeper into the case. Emily sat outside the courtroom, gripping her stuffed rabbit, waiting to see if they would finally believe her. Two officers approached Judge Dean, serious expressions, urgent whispers. Then, the bombshell. "The timestamp is real," one officer confirmed. "Gaines was at that charity event. He couldn't have signed those documents." Emily's breath caught. She was right. But then, the second officer added, "We checked the financial records again. There are discrepancies in the accounts. Someone manipulated the data." Judge Dean's face darkened. Emily leaned forward, barely breathing. "Who?" the judge demanded. The officer hesitated. Then he spoke a name that sent shockwaves through the room. "Victor Reynolds." Emily's hands clenched. She knew it. The officers continued. We also interrogated the man who interrupted the trial. He cracked under pressure. He admitted the entire case was fabricated. Judge Dean's jaw tightened. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. Michael Gaines was being framed, and now they had the proof. The gavel slammed down again. The courtroom was packed. People whispered, wondering what would happen next. Judge Dean cleared his throat. His voice was heavy with authority. After reviewing newly submitted evidence and conducting a preliminary investigation, this court has determined that serious irregularities exist in the prosecution's case. Ms. Bradshaw's face went pale. Judge Dean turned to the defense table. Mr. Gaines, you were accused of embezzlement based on documents that, as we now know, you could not have signed. Gasps, murmurs. Michael Gaines exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the table. Furthermore, Judge Dean continued, evidence has surfaced linking this scheme to businessman Victor Reynolds. Given these findings, this trial cannot proceed as originally intended. Emily held her breath. Was this it? Was it finally over? Then came the moment she had fought for. Judge Dean turned to the jury. This court dismisses all charges against Michael Gaines effective immediately. The room exploded. People gasped, whispered, shouted. Michael Gaines slumped into his chair, stunned. It was over. He was free. Emily felt a lump in her throat. She had done it. She had saved an innocent man. And in doing so, she had exposed a conspiracy bigger than anyone had realized. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Michael Gaines stared ahead, motionless. His hands, which had been gripping the table tightly for weeks, finally relaxed. He was free. Judge Dean's voice cut through the chaos. Order in the court. The room slowly fell silent. Michael blinked as if trying to process reality. His lawyer patted his shoulder, whispering something, but he barely heard it. Across the room, Emily sat frozen. She had won. But before she could even breathe, Ms. Bradshaw stood up, her face tight with frustration. Your Honor, I request time to reevaluate the prosecution's case. Judge Dean raised a firm hand. The case is dismissed, Ms. Bradshaw. The evidence is undeniable. Mr. Gaines was falsely accused, and this court will not allow an innocent man to suffer for crimes he did not commit. Bradshaw's lips pressed into a thin line. She knew she had lost. The jury shifted uncomfortably. They had been ready to convict, ready to sentence a man based on lies. Now they knew the truth. Michael slowly stood, exhaling. For the first time in months, he wasn't a prisoner of this trial. His eyes searched the room, then landed on Emily, a small girl, a fifth grader, the reason he was standing here as a free man. Michael walked toward her. Emily's breath caught. She wasn't sure what to do. Then he knelt down to her level. The entire courtroom watched in silence. Michael's voice was thick with emotion. You saved my life, young lady. Emily's throat tightened. She barely knew this man, and yet she had fought for him. Her voice came out small but strong. You didn't deserve what they did to you. Michael's eyes shone with gratitude. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the cameras flashed. Reporters surged forward. Emily, how did you know he was innocent? Where did you find the evidence? Did anyone help you? Emily's stomach twisted. She hadn't done this for attention. She just wanted the truth. Before she could answer, Judge Dean raised his hand again. This young lady has done something remarkable today, he said, but I will not allow this courtroom to turn into a media circus. Take your questions outside. The reporters groaned but obeyed. Michael stood up, still looking at Emily. Judge Dean's voice softened. Miss Hartman, you have a sharp mind. Maybe one day you'll be a lawyer. Emily blinked. A lawyer? The thought had never crossed her mind. But right now she just wanted to go home. As the courtroom emptied, people whispered Emily's name. She was a hero. Ms. Bradshaw packed up her files, looking flustered. She had underestimated a 10-year-old girl, and it had cost her everything. Outside, cameras flashed. Michael Gaines walked out a free man. Emily stood beside him, her backpack feeling heavier than ever. She had done what no one else could, and for the first time in her life, she realized how powerful the truth really was. The courtroom doors swung open. Cameras flashed. Reporters rushed forward. Emily flinched at the sudden burst of light. Too many people. Too many questions. Michael Gaines stepped beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he murmured. "You don't have to talk." But the crowd wanted answers. "Emily, how did you uncover the truth? What made you investigate? Did anyone help you?" Emily's fingers tightened around her stuffed rabbit. She wasn't used to attention. She just wanted to go home. Her mother's voice cut through the chaos. "Emily!" Jessica Hartman pushed through the reporters, eyes wet with tears. Emily barely had time to react before her mother wrapped her in a hug. "I was so scared," Jessica whispered, her arms trembling. "You ran off and I didn't know where you were. Then I saw the news." Emily clung to her, feeling safe for the first time all day. Michael stepped back, watching them with a soft smile. He knew what it felt like to be truly seen. The cameras kept rolling, but Emily barely noticed. She had done what she came to do. The truth had won. In the days that followed, Emily's story spread like wildfire. Her name was everywhere. TV, newspapers, even online blogs. People called her a hero. A 10-year-old girl had done what trained lawyers and investigators couldn't. Michael Gaines, now a free man, held a press conference. "I owe my life to Emily Hartman," he told the world. "She believed in my innocence when no one else did. And because of her, I get to stand here today." Emily watched from home, curled up on the couch with her mom. Jessica wiped a tear from her eye. "I still can't believe you did all that." Emily shrugged. "It was the right thing to do." Jessica pulled her close. "You're incredible, kiddo." For the first time, Emily felt it too. The scandal didn't end in that courtroom. With Michael's case dismissed, investigators dug deeper into Victor Reynolds. What they found was even worse than expected. Fraud, bribery, manipulated evidence. The case unraveled in a matter of days. Within a week, Victor Reynolds was arrested. The cameras turned their focus to him, the once powerful businessman, now just another criminal in handcuffs. Emily watched the news with quiet satisfaction. Justice had been served. But Emily's impact didn't stop there. People started talking about how easy it was for an innocent man to be framed. Local officials proposed new laws to prevent wrongful convictions. Schools launched programs teaching kids about justice and critical thinking. And in Emily's small town, a new initiative was created, the Hartman Youth Justice Program, a program designed to teach kids that one voice can make a difference. Emily was invited to speak at the first event. She stood in front of a room full of students, her hands clutching her notes. She took a deep breath. "I'm just a kid," she began. "I don't have a law degree. I don't know big words, but I know this. The truth matters." The room fell silent. If you know something is wrong, speak up. Even if no one believes you. Even if you're scared. Because the truth doesn't just change one life, it changes everything. The applause was deafening. Despite everything, Emily was still just a kid. She went back to school, did her homework, ate dinner with her mom. But something was different. People looked at her differently. Teachers smiled at her with admiration. Classmates whispered, "That's her," the girl from the trial. Even the principal called her into his office just to say, "I'm proud of you." It felt strange, but also kind of nice. One evening, Michael Gaines visited Emily's home. Jessica welcomed him inside, grateful to finally meet him properly. As they sat in the small living room, Michael looked at Emily with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "Judge Dean was right. You'd make a great lawyer." Emily frowned. "A lawyer?" Michael chuckled. "Yeah, you've got the mind for it, and the heart." Emily had never thought about it before. But now, maybe this was just the beginning.